Okay, Kevin, you ready to do this again?
Of course.
You seem so excited and ready to go.
Round two.
Round two. All right. So what we want to talk about today is how we need better communication around how buyers are compensating their buyers' agents. As if you're watching this video, I'm guessing you're either a realtor or maybe somebody who is interested in real estate, and there was a big settlement around commissions and home prices and things of that nature. So, if you're curious what that was all about, obviously you can do your own research. But what the net outcome of it was is that in the past, the sellers agreed to a commission split, and then that their agent shared it with a realtor that would bring a prospective buyer. That all got changed, and there's obviously a bit of a learning curve. And what we're figuring out is that the communication isn't great, and it's leading to a lot of issues for us from the lending perspective. My name's Jesse Buyer. Kevin Crier's with me on my team, and we try to run a smooth process that helps everybody have a great experience when buying a home. And there's just nuances around this that is causing confusion. So we thought we'd take the time, talk through it, create awareness, and hopefully get some feedback from people that are also going through it, and just bring light to this. So let's talk a little bit about how the payments can work. Who can pay how much and what are different variations that we could see.
Sure. Ever since the NAR settlement kind of came through, we've seen varying adjustments where the contracts will come over and will say that the seller is responsible for paying all the buyer agent commission, sometimes part of it, sometimes it's a percentage, sometimes it's a flat amount, kind of a little bit of the Wild West there.
Yeah. And so, I work visual people, so I think it makes the most sense to start to let people know how this comes through. So, there is technically, before you can start touring properties with a real estate agent, there's supposed to be an agreement that lays out how much you're going to be paying the realtor to start showing you homes. There's an official acknowledgement now, which wasn't something that was required in the past. And then, of course, there's a purchase agreement, which also spells out some of the components. So what I'd like to do is share just some inserts of what we receive as the lender. So I'm going to jump over here to a quick screen share. Okay, I'm going to let you speak to these.
Okay, so the first clip is from the new 8.0 contract, and this is just a segment from Section 4, which is the seller contribution to buyer brokerage compensation. As you can see in this example here, there is a spot for both the buyer and the seller to initial, and then there's a spot to select if it is going to be a percentage of the purchase price or if it is going to be a flat dollar amount. In this specific example, it appears as though the offer was written to be a 2.5% of the purchase price, but then you can see there's a spot where there's a red cross out, an initial, and instead the final agreed upon was just a flat $6,000 amount.
Yeah. And you know what? This obviously a snippet doesn't show folks what the actual purchase price was, but when you take the 2.5% times the purchase price on this contract, the 2.5 was more than 6,000. So that's where we're kind of like, okay, what happens to the overage that's not being accounted for? Is the buyer just going to pay the seller? Is the buyer going to pay the buyer's agent out of pocket that difference, or is the buyer's agent just agreeing to let it, fall off and they're okay with 6,000? So we're left being unsure. Here is another one.
So this one happens to be from another state that we work with. I think this one was in Florida. In this case, this came over as a separate addendum, but still same kind of format. They can either choose a flat amount, a percentage of the purchase price, or they can come to another section that they can as well. But the same thing is in common here, which is this only speaks to what the seller is agreeing to pay. It does not speak to if there's any additional amount that the buyer would need to pay based on their original buyer agent commission agreement.
Okay, and then I think we have three examples total. So here's the third one.
Third one, this again is coming from the new 8.0 contract. Same kind of format on here, but what is kind of hard to see all the way to the far right here is they started at a 3%. They crossed that out and instead made it 2.5% of the purchase price minus $450. This one kind of is another kind of confusing one that we ran into a few times where many times part of the commission is not only a flat percentage, but there's also usually some type of admin fee being charged as well. Unfortunately, as you can see how this one's written, it just reads as 2.5% minus $450. Where when this contract went all the way through to closing, what we learned towards the end was the seller was going to pay 2.5%, and then the buyer is responsible for paying a $450 like administrative fee to the buyer brokerage, which isn't that uncommon. We do see that quite a bit.
Yeah, but it's unclear to us. And then when you get to the closing table and the title companies start to see this, they don't know it either. So it sets everybody up for failure if you don't have a clear understanding of who's paying what. And once again, because the old way was it was a flat commission that was paid from the seller side and it was spelled out who got what. It was very straightforward. Now there's so many different versions of what a buyer can or cannot or is not responsible for. I think people just once again need to have better communication. All right, let me jump back here so we don't need to keep that screen
Yeah.
up. Um, so once again, Kevin and I are mortgage expert. We are not attorneys. We're not realtors. So our perspective on this is obviously around the mortgages and getting the loans and what have you. So we'd love for this to be more of an open dialogue type of a video where people can share their comments. What are you guys seeing? How are you handling it? It definitely seems as it relates to uh, the exclusive buyers agreements that are signing up front. There's a lot of individual type of agreements being made out there. It's not an industry standard like a contract. Of course, we just showed you examples, and contracts vary from state to state. And even in the Chicago market, the downtown contract looks different than the suburb contracts. So it further gets complicated because there's all these versions of exclusive buyers agreements as well. So that's why it's so important to communicate with everybody on your team. When I say team, I mean the lending side of it, the real estate side of it, and then the real estate attorney side of things if you're in a state that has a real estate attorney. Um, what else, Kevin? What are some other key things we want to make sure people are thinking about or that they're aware of when it comes to this?
Sure. I mean, to kind of compare contrast, this didn't come up before because, again, it was just assumed the sellers were paying it, so the buyer really wasn't involved. And as a lender, we weren't involved. It was just handled at the closing. Instead, now that there is chances for the buyer to pay it, we as a lender now have to be involved in not only disclosing that, so we're giving accurate figures to the client, but then also making sure that the number is included so that at closing, the title company has the right figures for it. So what has happened and what we've seen become a concern is the contract only speaks to what the seller's paying. Because we don't know the other piece of it, what has happened is we've gotten to closing tables and then find out, oh, wait, no, there's supposed to be this amount that the buyer's supposed to pay, or, oh, wait, we agreed to something else and we never provided this update. Best case scenario, it's just a delay and we have to get our numbers updated and figure that piece out. Worst case scenario, if the buyer's having to pay a portion of that, we as a lender have to qualify them based on making that payment. So if you happen to have a situation where a buyer is very tight, and it isn't uncommon, we may have to go back to underwriting, or we may not even qualify. We may have to find additional assets. So it's not something we want to surprise everybody at the last minute. It's something we want to get ahead of, be transparent, and be consistent so that all the way through the process, everybody understands this is what's being paid.
Right. Yeah, I think you definitely some red flags or something that would indicate we really got to get it clear on this early in the process would be if you have first time home buyer that's doing minimum down payment, or even if they're doing some sort of down payment assistance. That's an obvious one. Like, let's get clear on that. Um, I think if you have somebody who filled out a contract and that number is much lower than what you'd normally see. Like I think typical sellers agreeing to pay 2.5%, 3%, somewhere in that range. If you see 1%, that should be a red flag. Like when that contract comes over, you need to get a copy of it before you send that into underwriting. And I know, Kevin, we've talked about this. Like when is the time that we should be talking about it and getting clear on this? I think definitely at purchase contract, it's a time you should get clear on it. Definitely don't wait to the closing. But if like I just mentioned, if it's a first time home buyer, somebody's putting minimum down or down payment assistance, I think that this conversation needs to happen at the pre-approval stage. And I realize it can change depending on what they negotiate when they write the offer, but I think it's very important to get clear, at least for the buyers, because if they're a first time to this, like this might be something that they're just not realizing what's happening, and so that they understand what their at risk is. It's not just the down payment, it's not just the closing cost, it's also this commission that they, could be liable for. Um, so yeah, but once again, I don't want this to be some long drawn out video, but I think it's important that we have a conversation around it. Before we wrap it up, Kevin, is there anything else you want to touch upon on it?
No, I would just circle to your point. The biggest piece of this is communication. It's talking it through. If you know up front the intention is to get the seller to agree to pay the entire amount, great, let us know. If that changes, let us know as well. We can collaborate. We can make sure it's communicated to the bar, and everything's consistency there. But the big piece is communication and collaboration.
Yep. So once again, we're talking about it. I'd love to hear people's feedback. Please share your thoughts in the comments if you're doing something different. We can learn from you. If you've learned something and you just want to say, give us your feedback, that's great. But I know this will get better as an industry, right? We'll get used to the changes. The mortgage industry went through all these changes back, what's been 10 years now, in 2015, when we went through the CFPB, when they enacted TRID due to like the Frank Dodd Act. All that was super overwhelming for the mortgage industry. This is just a change that the real estate industry is going through, and we'll get our arms around it. So, all right, Kevin, appreciate the time, buddy. We'll be back on here sooner or later talking about something else that hopefully adds value and helps people stay informed.